From Washington, this is VOA News. Ukraine's parliament defeats no confidence vote. Thailand protests end suddenly. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting from Washington. After 2 weeks of street protests, Ukraine's parliament debated and voted on a no-confidence motion by the country's opposition. VOA's James Brooke reports.
Impeachment! 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 Impeachment!
Protesters chanted outside Ukraine's parliament Tuesday for the impeachment of the government, but their hopes were soon dashed. The government defeated a no-confidence vote. The vote extended the most serious political confrontation seen here since the Orange Revolution of 2004. Ukraine's embattled president, Viktor Yanukovych, evidently felt secure enough Tuesday to fly out of the country. He embarked on a 4-day visit to China, but he left behind a nation divided. James Brooke, VOA News, Kyiv.
U.S. and NATO officials are applying new pressure on Afghanistan's leaders to allow thousands of foreign troops to remain in the war-torn nation beyond next year. Speaking in NATO headquarters in Brussels Tuesday, Secretary of State John Kerry said there is more at stake than just bilateral relations between Afghanistan and the U.S. NATO Chief Anders Fogh Rasmussen says financial aid for Afghan security is at risk if NATO is not allowed to deploy its own trainers to Afghanistan after 2014. Afghan President Hamid Karzai has resisted signing a new security agreement with the United States. Vice President Joe Biden heads to Beijing today following talks in Japan about China's controversial air defense identification zone. After meeting Tuesday with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Vice President Biden said announcement of the new zone, in his words, has raised regional tension and increased the risk of accidents and miscalculations. Mr. Biden says he intends to raise the issue when he meets with Chinese leaders in Beijing. Following days of clashes in Bangkok, Thailand's prime minister is now calling for all segments of society, including protesters, to work together to find a solution to the recent political upheaval. VOA's Steve Herman has details.
The intensifying protests in Thailand's capital abruptly ceased as police took down barricades and allowed protesters onto the grounds of Government House and other fortified compounds. The apparent truce ahead of Thursday's 86th birthday of Thailand's revered monarch led to a scene hardly imaginable the previous day. A crowd of anti-government demonstrators sitting peacefully on the lawn of Government House, the seat of political power in Thailand. Tuesday's festivities are no guarantees that this conflict is over. Protest leader Suthep Thaugsuban but admitted the goal of removing the Thaksin family from power remains incomplete. Steve Herman, VOA News, Bangkok.
Yasser Arafat's widow says an extensive investigation by French scientists into the former Palestinian leader's death have ruled out poisoning by radioactive polonium. A report leaked Tuesday says the latest findings from the French team show Arafat died to a generalized infection. The results contradict Swiss scientific revelations last month that a study of Arafat's remains showed unexpected high activity of polonium and that he likely did not die of natural causes. The UN is beginning to use drones to gather intelligence about rebel groups in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The UN deployed its first 2 unmanned aerial vehicles in the region Tuesday. They are to be used for monitoring parts of Kivu province near Congo's borders with Uganda and Rwanda. Somalia tops the world as the most corrupt country. That's what the Berlin-based corruption watchdog Transparency International finds in its latest index. The group polls thousands of people in 177 countries about their perception of corruption. Henry Ridgewell has more.
Somalia, Afghanistan and North Korea each scored just 8 points out of 100 in Transparency International's 2013 Corruption Perceptions Index, where a score of 100 corresponds to a total lack of corruption. Ukraine ranks 144th on the index, one of the worst in its region, which included Europe, Russia and most of the former Soviet states. The best performers in the 2013 index were New Zealand and Denmark, with Scandinavian countries consistently among the least corrupt. The United States came in 19th. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
I'm Ray Kouguell, VOA News. More on the internet at voanews.com.